Now, friends, this general election is coming down to a straight choice about who will stand up for working families. A choice between another 5 years of a recovery just reaching the City of London under the Tories, or Labour's better plan to ensure the recovery reaches the doors of working families across Britain. And with 2 weeks to go, it's time the choice was made clear. The Conservatives want to pretend that another 5 years of their failing plan is the route to a good life for Britain's families. The truth is, the Tories are engaged in a grand deception. As the Institute of Fiscal Studies have today confirmed, the Tories are committed to extreme spending plans. And they have also confirmed that Britain would be facing the deepest cuts over the next 3 years of any advanced country in the world under the Conservative plans. It's a plan so extreme that far from protecting the NHS, they would end up cutting the NHS. It's a plan so extreme that it wouldn't mean 3 years of the good life, it would mean 3 more years of the hardest of times. Not for the rich and powerful, who've done so well with 5 years of the Tories, but it would mean hard times for the working families of Britain, who put in the hours, pay their taxes and play their part. It would mean hard times for young people just starting out in life and wondering if they'll ever have a decent chance. And it would mean hard times for the NHS that we all rely on. We're not going to let it happen. We will rescue the NHS from these Tories. And friends, David Cameron has broken all the NHS promises he made before the last election. He promised there would be no more top-down reorganisation. Remember that? And then he wasted billions in the biggest top-down reorganisation the NHS has ever seen. He stood outside a hospital with a sign that said no cuts and no closures, only to shut that very same A&E. He said there'd be no return to people waiting hours on end in A&E. And last year, 1 million people waited more than 4 hours in A&E. Under his government, his A&E targets are in tatters and patients are waiting longer and longer to be seen. He promised extra money for frontline services like cancer treatment, but ended up cutting cancer budgets. And you know, now in this campaign, he's at it again. After 5 years of failure, he wants us to believe the NHS is safe in his hands. He wants us to believe he's going to increase funding for the NHS. But he can't tell you, he can't tell the British people where a single penny of the money is coming from. You can't save the NHS with an IOU, and you can't trust the Tories on the National Health Service. That's why we need Labour's better plan, a balanced plan to cut the deficit every year and balance the books, a plan to make the economy work for working people again, and a plan to have an NHS with time to care. 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more doctors, cancer tests within 1 week, and a guaranteed GP appointment within 48 hours. That is Labour's better plan for an NHS with time to care. Now, friends, there are 2 weeks left in this campaign. 2 weeks left to build a country that works for working people again. 2 weeks left to rescue our NHS. 2 weeks left to fight for an £8 minimum wage. 2 weeks left to ban those exploitative 0 hours contracts. And that's what the Labour government will do. 2 weeks left to guarantee apprenticeships for our young people and cut tuition fees. 2 weeks left to freeze energy bills. And yes, 2 weeks left to abolish the bedroom tax, which is what the next Labour government will do. And friends, let me just say this finally, it's also up to you. You know, I was in Morecambe the other day, and a lady said to me, "Will you win Morecambe for us?" And I said, "No, will you win Morecambe for us?" And I say the same thing to you here in Nuneaton and right across the region. You know, I'll do my bit. Vicky and all our candidates will do their bit. But this election could come down to a few hundred votes in a few dozen constituencies. And that's why I'm counting on you. And you know, the Tories definitely have the money. They've got Linton Crosby. I'm not sure that's such an advantage. But they don't have the people. Because it's a funny thing. People don't want to knock on doors for the Conservative Party. Now, I don't want to knock on doors for the Conservative Party either, so I'm not surprised. But people do want to knock on doors for the Labour Party because they want us to save the NHS. They want a higher minimum wage. They want a country that works for working people again. That's what we're fighting for in this election. We're going to fight to the finish in the next 2 weeks so we can create the kind of country we know we can build. Thank you very much. Now, friends, we're reinventing the open-air meeting. I'm not going to take questions from party members today. I'm going to take questions from my friends from the bus. And as I always say on these occasions, please hear them respectfully because they may ask difficult questions, but that's what they're paid to do. So I'm going to take Carl first of all.
Carl Dinnan from ITV News. You mentioned what the IFS have been saying today. They also said there was a significant probability that you would spend the additional £8 billion that the NHS wants. Do you agree that there's a significant possibility that you would do that? And also, if I could just ask for a quick response to the Tory claim that a Labour SNP government would cost everyone £358 more.
OK, on the second point first, Carl, look, this is just more evidence of a desperate Tory campaign, desperate claims from a desperate party. On the first point, I think what's striking about what we've said compared to the other parties is we're the only party with a funded plan for the National Health Service. And this is the key point. You know, it's all very well the Conservative Party saying they're going to create extra money for the NHS. But if you can't tell people where the money is coming from, there's nothing more dangerous for the NHS than that. Because you can't fund the NHS with an IOU. You can only fund the NHS with a funded plan. That's our £2.5 billion Time to Care fund. Lucy.
Lucy Manning from BBC News. The IFS says your plans will clear the debt and the deficit more slowly. Are you happy with that? And why won't you be straight? I mean, we're on a cricket pitch, no spin. Be straight to people.
Whoa, well done, Lucy.
Be straight
Now.
Be straight with people. When will you clear the deficit? Because you haven't been straight with people on that.
OK, let me be very clear with you, Lucy. We've said we will clear the deficit as soon as possible in the next Parliament. That's the right thing to do, and let me explain why. We're going to cut the deficit every year, and we're going to balance the books. Now, you could set an arbitrary timetable, which is what George Osborne did at the beginning of this Parliament, but he has failed. He has failed. And what matters with fiscal credibility is setting out clear rules that you can meet. And I do just want to say this about the IFS, because here's what they say about our plans and about Labour. They say they have given more detail of how they would achieve deficit reduction, a fuller description of the Conservatives of what they need to do to reduce the deficit sufficiently to meet their aspirations. Now, that's the point. We've set out a fuller description of how we're going to meet our plans. It's a clear plan. It's the right plan. Look, there are some people in this election who say we don't need to make any cuts at all. There's the Conservatives, and we've now had it confirmed today that they want to have the most extreme cuts in the developed world, confirmed by the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Ours is a better plan, a balanced plan, and the right plan.
£90 billion more of debt. £90 billion more of debt. Are you happy with that?
No, and let me explain why. The IFS assumptions are based on three different things which I frankly don't accept. The first is based on the idea that when it comes to our plans, it's not simply the budget in balance, which is what they say our plan is. We want a current surplus. Secondly, they pick out a particular year for when we're going to achieve it. And thirdly, I don't accept this point that the Tories are going to even achieve their plans. You know, what is the record in this Parliament? The record in this Parliament is that they've made the cuts, but they haven't cut the deficit as they promised. Sophie.
Sophie Ridge, Sky News. One of the big questions people have about you is your leadership. Can you walk the world stage with leaders like Putin or Obama? And you haven't managed to prove that yet, have you? You haven't proved that yet, have you?
Well, look, let me set out what my approach is, Sophie, and maybe I can put it in the context of the European summit that is happening today, which is obviously a very important issue. I've been saying for some time, as has the whole of the Labour Party, that we shouldn't have ended that search and rescue in the Mediterranean. last November, that it was the wrong thing to do, that, look, when people are drowning, it is primarily the responsibility of the traffickers, and we've got to deal with those traffickers. But at the same time, we've got to recognise our humanitarian responsibilities. Now, I think these matters come down to judgment and values. And if you look at my record over the last 5 years, I think I've shown the right judgment and the right values.
So you're saying that you think you have proved your leadership credentials?
In the end, the British people will make that judgment in 2 weeks' time. But if they want a leader who will stand up for what he believes in, I stood up in the summer of 2013 and I said it was wrong to take military action in Syria. I think I made the right judgment, and I think David Cameron was making the wrong judgment. At the same time, when it comes to action against ISIS, I'm going to carry on that military action because it's the right thing to do. We've got to defeat ISIS at home and abroad. So look, people will judge me and indeed judge the differences on the question of values, judgment, and the decisions we make, and I'm happy for them to make that judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming here. I want to really reinforce my thanks to our candidates. Let's hear it for our brilliant candidates, all of our candidates in this election. And look, I do want to say this. I do want to sort of reinforce this point to you. If you've got any DIY that needs doing between now and May the 7th, put it off till May the 8th. Family weddings, birthday parties, they're all cancelled until then. Because, look, you know, this point is absolutely crucial. I don't say what most politicians say. I say change doesn't just come from politicians. In fact, politics is too important to be left to politicians. Think about the NHS. Think about the NHS and the plan that we're talking about today, right? That NHS was not simply built by Anira and Bevan and the 1945 Labour government. It was built because people said it's got to be built. It's because people said after the 1930s, never again. They said never again a patchwork national health service. Never again a patchwork system where you have to pay for medical care. And if they just left it to the politicians, look, there were great Labour politicians in that generation. But if they just left it to those politicians, it wouldn't have happened. It's because of people made it happen. The movement made it happen. And then think about all of the other changes that have happened in our country. Workers' rights, gay and lesbian rights, the minimum wage. They didn't just happen because nice politicians came along and said, we're going to make it happen. It happened because people made it happen. And that is the big difference between ourselves and the Conservatives. You know, when I say they want to run the country for the rich and powerful, and we want to run the country for working people, that's not just a view about our economy, our society, it's a view about our democracy as well. It's about how political change happens. Political change happens from the bottom up. It happens because people make it happen. And I'm looking at all of those people today. I'm looking at all of those people today because you're going to make this change happen in the next 2 weeks. You're going to make change happen in this country. You're going to change this country so it works for all of the people you know, all of your friends and family. And we're going to be proud to have a Labour government that changes Britain. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.